Hey guys, what's up? It's Come for the Win, and we're back for another edition of Monster Hunter Rise. Today on the channel, we're going to be taking a look at a mixed bow and arrow set. This one is a utility set, which means it's good for all-around hunting. Very, very good. As you can see, the bow we're going to be using is the Sinister Soul Piercer. It has Pierce level 5, spread 2 levels of that. We are not using the level 4. Pieces that we're going to be using in this armor are Zinogre Helm, Zinogre Mail, Rachna, Arm Guards, and a Jananth Coils, Rachna Greaves, and we have a pretty good talisman to help. So the Zinogre Helm is going to give you Laden Power, Weakness, Exploit, both pieces of Zinogre, I should say. Rachna is going to give you Constitution, and a Jananth is going to give you the attack boost you need. The Rachna Greaves are going to give you Constitution, Stamina Surge. Now the thing about bows in particular are that they use up a lot of stamina because you're going to have to charge up your shots. So since you're needing to charge up your shots, they actually waste a lot of your stamina. Laden Power temporarily increases affinity and reduces the stamina cost. Weakness Exploit, which we did use in the light bowgun set, basically takes opportunity to, when you hit a weak spot, you do more damage to the monster. So this mix set will give you Constitution level 5, Attack Boost level 4, Weakness Exploit level 3, Stamina Surge level 3, pretty much everything you need to conserve your stamina and do damage with affinity. We're going to be abusing affinity here. So, as you can see here, Weakness Exploit is maxed out. Stamina Surge will mean that we can charge up our shots and not really reduce our stamina too much. Laden Power is just there for when we do hit with Infinity. Now, if you are new to the bow and arrow for Monster Hunter, it uses something called coatings. Certain bows allow you to use certain coatings. We're going to be having basically here close range, exhaust coating, power coating, and blast coating. Sinister Soul Piercer naturally is a blast element bow. So naturally when we fire off bow and arrow shots, blast damage will actually occur depending on certain shots and the amount of blast that's stored up and accumulated. So keep that in mind. However, blast coating will help actually procure blast even further. Blast is really good for damaging parts. That's actually going to help with our talisman because we have a part breaker as well as Weakness Exploit as the abilities on that talisman. Now, if you're new to the bow, there's something that you're going to have to learn. The first thing really that you need to learn is that you just can't stand back and fire bows from any distance. You're going to want to master critical distance. Critical distance basically is when you're standing in a specific area. Hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate this against this Ankylosaur. I hope I'm pronouncing that monster right. Okay, that didn't do it. You see how the screen just shook there a second? That is considered the critical distance for the bow. So what you want to do is most of your shots, you want to be within the distance where you see the screen shaking every time you fire off a bow shot. Now, depending on the level of charge, depends where that critical distance is. So, in theory, it's a matter of a feeling out process. Now, as you fire off a bow and arrow, you can hit the A button, which will fire off spread shots. That's considered your follow-up shot. That does a great deal of damage, and if you're standing basically where I was right there, you will be able to get off a critical distance shot, which, as you see, the screen shakes, and you will do the maximum amount of potential damage. Now, when you're doing critical distance shots in particular, it's very important to try to go for the weak spots of a monster. Now, the last video I actually linked you to Kirikano, a very good resource for everything Monster Hunter related, in which you basically got a breakdown of every monster and where their weak spots are. For all intents and purposes, general rule of thumb, any monster's face is considered a weak spot. Usually, their tails, sometimes the backside, depending on the monster, could be considered a weak spot. For this particular monster, it has a very large face, so that's pretty much fairly obvious, I hope, to everybody that's watching, that that would be considered a weak spot. So with the bow and arrow, what you want to do is get critical distance and fire those shots off at the weak spot. In this case, it's the head. Now, obviously, monsters are not going to stay still. They never do in any of the Monster Hunter game, which means it's a matter of a feeling out process. Some monsters move a lot more than others. Hopefully, if you are with good partners online, you'll be able to pin down the monsters. Bow and arrow is deceptively very strong when you are able to master the critical distance. Now, general strategies that I like to incorporate for bow and arrow is First off, I will usually use my power coatings. Power coatings just do more damage every time you fire off your power charged up shots. Then usually what I like to do personally is switch to exhaust coating. Exhaust coating is basically just like the exhaust bullets for the light bowgun and the heavy bowgun, in the sense that every time you fire off a shot of that, it is procuring a status effect called exhaust. So after several hits with exhaust, the monster basically becomes exhausted. They'll be slower. They will drool. When you see them drooling, that means their stamina is basically depleted. That will allow you to be able to do a lot more damage to the monster because they're stuck in one's position, and then you could just go ham on the face, trying to abuse basically that critical distance. So it's very important to learn critical distance, but then fire off the exhaust. Then normally what I like to do, I'm going to, as you see here, switch in a second. Whenever I want to get a couple shots off because it is exhausted here, I'm going to switch to blast. That's what I like to do, is then switch to blast. As you see, certain times I fired off shots, the screen was shaking. That means I'm within critical distance for the bow and arrow. So you could kind of think of bow and arrow as a mid-range weapon. You can't be too far away from it. So if you're trying to do far-away shots, you want something more like the heavy bowgun, which I will cover in a future installment for this series that we're doing, covering all the armors. So going to use up the remainder of the blast cones here. Since the monster is down and it's also exhausted, I'm charging up the shots to get critical distance off. When you see the screen shake, that means you're doing the maximum amount of damage. And remember, you're using weakness exploit. And if we have full health, then laden power will go off as well, which is very fortunate for us. I got to dodge out of the way here because those fireballs will cuss it. As you can see, the exhaust ammo has worked. So I'm going to be able to do more damage because the monster is exhausted and will not move around quite frequently. Basically, what I like to do is I leave the built-in close range coating for the bow and arrow for last. Close range is exactly what it sounds like. When you are extremely close to the monster and you're firing off shots, you do an increased amount of damage. That is based on the level of charge. So keep in mind there are levels of charges to your bow and arrow, similar to greatsword, if you're familiar with greatsword. So you will glow. Usually at first, it's like a very light tinge of red. That means that's a power level 2 shot. Then when you charge it up and you see that it is yellow, that's usually your level 3 shot. Now, there is an item for the bow and arrow called the Mighty Bow Feather that you can unlock by completing Arena Quest and getting the proper coins. Mighty Bow Feather in particular is not really good for this particular build because we just want a bow that is good at dealing a lot of damage out and not relying so much on the charge shots as it is blast and just maintaining critical distance and abusing affinity to be able to do the majority of our damage. Now, I will cover in the future another build for the bow and arrow that makes use of level 5 and level 4 charges of bow and arrows. Those bow and arrows are mostly elemental bows, meaning that they are specific to certain elements in which it does most of its damage through elemental damage, which is kind of situational in Monster Hunter because certain monsters are only weak to certain elements and other monsters are not weak to those elements. So those are more niche sets. Okay, as you see here, when the monster's down, you can, by hitting the X and A button, fire off a charge shot. Basically what you'll see is that your bow and arrow has a ignited lit up fuse to it, and when you fire it off, it's going to do a lot of damage to it. I don't recommend using those too often, only really when you have the monster down for a while and you know that it's exhausted, because it takes a while to fire off those particular charge shots. Okay, I gotta be careful here, I gotta heal. That's another thing about bow and arrow. You have to be careful because since you're using up a lot of stamina here, you can run into situations where you won't be able to dodge because maybe you're in the red for your meter because you held in the charge too long, which is perfectly fine. It's okay because charge shots do more damage, especially if it's in critical distance. But you have to keep an eye on things and learn to dodge. You can kind of strafe around with the bow and arrow, similar to the light bowgun. Okay, so I'm going to go back into critical distance here. As you see, the screen was shaking there, which means I was getting off critical distance. Okay, it's out of range. That's one good thing of quality of life changes for Monster Hunter Rise. It will tell you when you're not in range at all. Now, you can fire off bow and arrow shots not in critical distance. The only problem with that in particular is that you are not going to do the max amount of damage, and this particular style that I'm using for the bow and arrow I'm not particularly fond of, but I haven't really found one I particularly like. Another good thing about this particular bow and arrow set is that you will be able to break a lot of parts. Breaking more parts means you get more quest rewards at the end. All right, fire off those follow-up shots. So usually you want to fire a charged-up shot, usually level 2 or 3. Then fire up your follow-up shots when you can. Always keep in mind, you want to see that screen shaking a lot. Also, another little cue that you're doing more damage with your bow and arrow is if you hear on the screen kind of like heavier hits. If you're farther away, you're going to kind of hear like your bows are, or your arrows, I should say, are kind of like bouncing off. It's a very light tinge. It's kind of similar to the sound as when your weapon is bouncing off a monster's hide. Enkonosim is ready to be captured. I'm not going to capture it. I'm just going to kill it. Might let it get away here, depending. My stamina is getting pretty low here because I've used up a lot. I can't fire off charge shot. It's going to run away, maybe? No, it slipped and fell. So it's going to stay and fight. It's pretty pissed off, though, as you can see. All right, so same strategy here. Fire off as many arrows as you can. Sometimes you can spam your arrows, too. That's not a problem because the level 2 for this particular ammo of the bow is pierce shots. Pierce shots, obviously, as it sounds, pierces the skin, which allows things to... Wow, it's moving extremely slow. It's not going to be able to stay up too much longer, guys. And we're getting off some very good shots here. As you can see, every so often we are getting off a critical distance. It's a matter of trying to feel it out. Every monster is going to be different when it comes to critical distance due to the fact that some monsters are larger. And some of them are going to be actually even harder for you to be able to get really mid-range with it. So you have to be very cautious as to bow and arrow when you want to use it. It's not the best weapon to use, in particular for every monster, particularly if you're soloing. As you saw there, we hit it right between the eyes. The screen shook critical distance damage, and we took out the Unkonosim, or some. I don't know how you pronounce that monster's name, so please forgive me. As I said before, not native Japanese, so I do not know necessarily. Unkonosim. That's what an American would probably sound it out as, so... All right, so as you see, that's basically how bow and arrow plays this particular build. It's good all-around bow due to the fact that it has blast and it has some pretty good coatings. Power coating is on basically every bow. Exhaust coating is a very good coating as well. Blast coating is pretty good. I like blast pretty much as the element because it's something that most monsters are weak to, and the fact that blast accumulates and then has explosions go off on the monster side has more potential for you to break parts. And then obviously, as you saw with the talisman, I'm using weakness, exploit, and part breaker. That works in conjunction with things. Now, like I said with that charge shot, that's a matter of figuring it out. If you see the monster's down for a long time and you have enough time to get it off, definitely do it. We are going to do another hunt, so I can show off on a different type of monster. This one's going to be a bit more bigger. How well the bow and arrow does for that as well. When you're fighting like a Rathian or a Rathalos, that's when you are going to be a bit more cautious because stamina conservation, knowing when to dodge, is very important. Okay, so that was a 10-minute clear time. In a group of 4 hunters, let's say there's 3 heavy, or not heavy, but light bowgun users, and you're a bow and arrow, you will be able to take out a monster between 3 to 4 minutes as long as you are in the right distance to be able to get off critical distance shots. So keep that in mind. Okay, so this time around we're going to be fighting a Tetrahedon, and this is a bigger monster, so we can be able to show you more so hopefully critical distance as well as just why it's very important to wreck the face when possible in this charge shot. So same strategy as before. We're going to start with the power coatings, then we'll move to exhaust, then we'll move to blast, and then last but not least, close range coatings we will use last. Now, you can kind of switch this up. I'm just saying that this is the best rule of thumb for when you are soloing monsters. When you're not soloing monsters and you're in a group of 4 online, you could do definitely a different strategy. You can strategize. So you could probably switch to the exhaust coating. Okay, so Tetrahedon, as you can see here, when you see the screen shaking, you know you are within the right distance to fire off the perfect charged up shots. Now keep in mind, the longer that you hold this in and you're getting critical distance, that is the maximum damage that you're going to be dealing with the bow and arrow. Don't hesitate, though, to fire off a couple of very quick, weak-level charges, because, remember, blast is going to accumulate as well, so it's a matter of feeling it out, guys. And obviously, there's certain situations where you can't necessarily get as close to the monster as you want here. Trying to find my critical distance here. Did not get it there, but obviously hitting the monster in the face, as we did there, does weaken it. He's gotten actually kind of tired now, so... Remember, since we're using weakness exploit, it is very important to go for the face because we are doing infinity there. That follow-up shot was a critical distance shot because you saw the screen shake. Critical distance shot just went off there as well. Remember, every charge level has a different basic critical distance, so it's a matter of learning it. You can fire, as you saw there, a arc shot. I don't really recommend firing them unless you have a Wyvern fire arc shot, because those are probably the best ones because it's basically a large arrow that falls down and fires off a bomb. The one that I did used to be really good in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, not so much in this one. But mostly you're going to be wanting to follow through with just charge shots and then the supercharged one with X and A. I need to get the monster down to be able to pull that one off, though. Okay. You should probably run Steadfast in this set. I did not put it on here because I didn't have enough parts to carve. Okay, so I'm going to heal. I got to switch the coding, but I'm going to wait here a second. All right, you hear that was bouncing off. That means I'm not within the distance that's required to do damage. Switching to exhaust now. Same strategy here. Fire off a couple of these. Going to aim for the face because that's his weak spot. Keep firing it off. Saw the screen shake. That's the critical distance for that level charge. Not so much for this one. Okay, screen shook again. They're critical distance. Screen shook again. They're critical distance. Not that time, though. All right, we're just going to go ham on the face to procure exhaust here. We're not really trying to focus so much on critical distance damage. All right. Almost done with exhaust coin. I'm going to fire off the charge shot. That's done with X and A because it stays down long enough, and that does a lot of damage. It does some pierce as well. So we ran out of exhaust. Now we switch to blast coating. Same strategy as before, guys. Fire at the face. Every time you see the screen shake, you know you're within the required distance for that charge shot. That follow-through was a critical distance shot. So it's a matter of just feeling it out, guys. Process of elimination. If you see the screen shaking, you know you're doing it right. If you hear even the sounds, you know you're doing some damage. Try not to stretch it too much if you can't always get off critical distance. Oh, he's exhausted here. Let me go for the face now. Perfect opportunity, since it's exhausted, to just go ham on the face. Remember, this is a weakness exploit set, so you want to go for weak spots because that's when you're going to be doing the most amount of damage. I should have went to close coating range, but obviously I was in the process of firing things. I'm going to equip it now. To equip coatings, even though this set will automatically equip them when you switch it, it is the X button by itself when you have the bow sheathed. All right, there we go. I'm going to arm for the face right now. I'm not going to worry too much about it. Charged up shot. We got it off, and that was a critical distance shot as well. Okay, I finally put the close range coating off. Now we're just going to fire it off. Close range coating is good in the sense that if you're not getting your close critical distance shots off, that it's still going to do a lot of damage. So keep that in mind. You saw screen shaking, so that was perfect distance there. Sometimes, though, you have to move around, obviously, because you do not want to get hit by the monster. So that's pretty much how bow and arrow is kind of one of the more, not complex weapons to use, but it takes a while to kind of get the hang of things. All right, I'm going to fire off the follow-up shot there, which did critical distance. I should move probably a step back there. I did not. I am not really using my switch skills here because I haven't really found one that I particularly like for the bow and arrow as of yet. So definitely if you found a switch skill for the bow and arrow that you like, definitely leave it in the comments. Let me know. As always, all these builds are work in progress. It may change come in the next update. That maybe there's a better bow that comes out because we get more monsters in the next update, and maybe one. I mean, usually the end-all to be-all in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate was the Teostra bow. Unfortunately, Teostra is not in the game as of yet. There is a rumor that supposedly it will be coming in the next update, along with 3 other Elder Dragons that most people are familiar with. Camelios, Koshala, Teostra. Oh, wow. Look at that. Territorial bag. Wow, that Lagambi is going ham on the Tetrahedon there. All right. He was trying to eat him. Did you see that? All right. We're going to let these two fight it out and just kind of pick our spots there. Oh, all right. We got him dead center. I'm going to go river and whiting, though. This is really good to get extra monster part breaks, so I always recommend doing this. And it also will deal a lot of damage to the monster if you get the minigun right. Something I actually just recently learned when it comes to wyvern riding is that if you do the evade, you can follow that up with an attack, and sometimes it actually refreshes your attack options even quicker. So definitely use the evade option. It's actually really good and very exploitable at the moment. Hopefully they do not change this in the next update. All right, so we knocked it down. Gonna go for the mounted monster attack. Gonna let it go ham here. Plan of action is once I have this thing down, I'm gonna go for that XA charge shot directly to the face. I think the monster should be just about dead from this, hopefully. Let's go directly for the face. And we got the critical distance shot, which took out the monster. I could not have asked for a better ending to that hunt. We got to see an awesome territorial battle, and I got off that final shot to take down the monster. So this is basically how the meta bow and arrow set works. This is kind of the go-to. This is the best all-around bow set that you can use currently in Monster Hunter Rise. Now, there are builds that focus on elemental builds and focus on different bows and focus on using the mighty bow feather. I will cover that in future installments for it, but I wanted to give you a good foundation for something that's good to work for and will pretty much cover you through just about any hunt, as opposed to elemental bows where you have to keep switching different bows to be able to take out the monster effectively. So keep that in mind. Alright guys, so that's pretty much going to do it. I want to see what the clear time is. This should be roughly about 8-minute clear time. In a group of 4 where you're just going ham on the monster, chances are you'll get a 3 to 4 minute clear time. Obviously, it depends on the group of people you're hunting with online because people's skill levels are obviously different, and there's no problem with that, really. Alright, so we got a couple of decent rewards. Believe it or not, the Tetrahedon pieces work for another bow sets, which is why I actually opted to farm this monster. Alright, 7-minute clear time. So if we were in a group of 4, that would definitely have been a 3-minute, maybe even 2-minute clear time. Thanks for watching. A like and subscribe on this video is greatly appreciated as it helps the channel grow, and I'll see you for the next Monster Hunter Rise video.